The pen feels heavy in my hand, heavier than it should. The lawyer's perfume, something floral and expensive, fills the small office. Papers rustle as she slides another document across the mahogany desk toward me. Outside the window, October rain taps against the glass like impatient fingers. My phone buzzes again. The screen lights up with Dominic's name. That's the 47th call this week. I don't answer. Haven't answered in 3 days. Mrs. Patterson, the lawyer says. Her voice is gentle but firm, professional. Are you absolutely certain? My hand hovers over the signature line. The ink from the pen tip glistens under the overhead lights. I can smell the leather of these chairs, feel the cool air from the vent above me, hear the clock on the wall marking each second with a tiny click. 4 words. That's all it took to destroy my son's world. 4 simple words that changed everything between us forever. Hi, viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. 3 weeks ago, I was standing in a wedding venue 4 hours from home, watching champagne bubbles rise in crystal glasses. I was watching my only son laugh with his groomsmen, his ties slightly crooked the way it always got when he was excited. I was thinking about how handsome he looked, how proud his father would have been. I didn't know that in less than an hour he'd ask me to leave, that he'd choose a woman he'd known for 2 years over the mother who'd raised him alone for 24, that everything I'd sacrificed would mean nothing when it mattered most. But that's not where this story ends. It's where it begins, because the next morning when my phone rang and I saw his name flash across the screen, when I heard him say those words, "Mom, I need the property papers," something inside me shifted, something cold and clear and final. I sign my name. The pen scratches across the paper with a sound like tearing fabric. Corin Elizabeth Patterson, each letter deliberate, each stroke permanent. And this second set the lawyer taps another document. I sign that one too, then a third, then a fourth. My signature gets faster with each page, more confident. The lawyer witnesses each one, her own pen moving in precise practice strokes. My phone buzzes again. Dominic, call 48. There's one more thing, I tell the lawyer. My voice doesn't shake. I want to make a phone call. She nods and slides her desk phone toward me. The receiver is cool against my palm as I dial the number I know by heart. It rings once, twice, 3 times. Hello? Dominic's voice is breathless, desperate. Mom, is that you? I look at the signed document spread across the desk at the lawyer's kind eyes, watching me at the rain still falling outside the window. Dominic, I say, listen carefully. I'm going to say this once. The words leave my mouth. 4 words that will haunt him. 4 words that make the lawyer's eyes widen. 4 words that make my son's breathing stop on the other end of the line. But you don't get to know what they are yet. Not until you understand how we got here. Not until you feel what I felt standing in that wedding venue, holding a champagne glass with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, watching my son walk toward me with that look on his face. The one that said he'd already made up his mind and nothing I could say would matter. June heat poured through the massive windows of the reception hall, the kind of heat that makes your skin prickle even in air conditioning. I'd been standing near the dessert table for 20 minutes watching servers arrange tiny cakes on silver platters. My dress collar felt too tight. I'd bought this dress specifically for today. Navy blue knee-length, the kind of formal attire Dominic said Bridget wanted for the wedding party families. It cost $200 I couldn't really afford, but that didn't matter. Nothing mattered except being here, being present, being the mother my son deserved on his wedding day. The drive had taken 4 hours. I'd left at 5 that morning to avoid traffic, stopped once for coffee, and gas arrived 2 hours early to help with any last-minute needs. Dominic had texted me at 7. "We're good, Mom. Just relax and enjoy the day." So, I relaxed. I smiled at distant cousins and Bridget's parents and the groomsmen I'd met once before. I held my champagne glass and pretended my feet didn't hurt in these shoes and watched my son laugh and dance and celebrate. The ceremony had been beautiful. Bridget wore white lace that probably cost more than my car payment. The flower arrangements alone could have fed a family for a month, but I didn't say that. I just smiled and cried and clapped when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride." I'd brought a card. Inside was a check for $8,000. Every penny I'd saved from working extra shifts at the hospital over the past year. Night shifts that left me exhausted and achy and barely able to function. But Dominic had asked if I could chip in for the wedding, and what kind of mother says no? The card was still in my purse. I'd planned to give it to him during the reception, maybe during a quiet moment when we could talk privately, when I could hug him and tell him how proud I was, how much I loved him, how much his father would have loved seeing this day. His father, Marcus, dead. 12 years now from a heart attack that took him at 46. I could still see his face sometimes in Dominic's expressions, hear his laugh in Dominic's voice. Marcus would have worn a ridiculous tie and told embarrassing stories and danced with me during the father-mother dance that never happened. I pressed my fingers against the champagne glass. The condensation was cool and wet. A bead of water ran down the side and dripped onto my hand. "Mom." I turned. Dominic stood 3 FT away. His jaw was set in that particular way, tight, determined, the muscles working under his skin. I knew that look. I'd seen it when he was 7 and determined to ride his bike without training wheels. When he was 16 and announcing he was going to college across the country when he was 22 and telling me he was moving in with Bridget, it was the look that said he'd decided something and nothing would change his mind. "The ceremony was beautiful, honey," I said. My voice came out normal, cheerful even. Bridget looked absolutely, "You need to leave." The words hit me like cold water, like a slap, like falling downstairs. Around us, guests laughed and danced and clinked glasses. Someone's uncle was attempting the electric slide near the DJ booth. His moves enthusiastic if uncoordinated. The music was loud, some pop song I didn't recognize, and the bass thumped through the floor. What I couldn't have heard him right. The music was too loud. The room was too crowded. My ears were ringing from standing too close to the speakers. "You need to leave," he repeated. He still wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed somewhere over my left shoulder, like he was talking to someone behind me instead of to my face. "Bridget doesn't want you here. You're making her uncomfortable." The champagne glass was slippery in my hand. I gripped it tighter, afraid I'd drop it, afraid the glass would shatter on the polished floor, and everyone would turn and stare and know that something was wrong, that the groom's mother was causing a scene. "Dominic, I haven't even spoken to her since. Just go, Mom." Now he looked at me. His eyes were hard flat, like looking at a stranger. "Please don't make this difficult." Difficult, I was making things difficult. Me, the woman who'd raised him alone after his father died, who'd worked 16-hour shifts at the hospital so he could have piano lessons and summer camps and new clothes for school, who'd held him through nightmares and homework meltdowns, and his first real heartbreak when Sarah Miller broke up with him junior year, who'd refinanced her house twice to help pay for his college when the scholarships didn't cover enough, who'd driven 4 hours in the dark this morning just to be here for him. Dominic. My throat was closing. Each word felt like pushing through mud. I drove 4 hours to be here. I haven't done anything wrong. I've barely even Bridget thinks it would be better if you left." His voice dropped lower, like he didn't want anyone to overhear, like he was ashamed, but not ashamed enough to stop. "She says you're controlling, that you try to run everything, that you've been giving her looks all day, controlling." The word echoed in my head. I'd given Bridget space when they started dating. I'd bitten my tongue when she moved into my guest room for 6 months and never once offered to help with groceries or utilities. I'd smiled and nodded when she picked out a wedding venue that cost $40,000 and asked if I could contribute. I'd contributed $8,000. $8,000 that represented every extra shift I could physically handle. Every night I came home too tired to eat. Every morning I woke up with my back aching and my feet swollen, and I'd given her looks. I'd tried to control things. "Bridget's waiting for you to leave," Dominic said. He glanced back toward the head table. I followed his gaze. She sat there in her white lace and veil watching us. Her face was calm, pleasant, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. She held a champagne flute in one hand and smiled a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. A smile like a knife. "She's upset," Dominic continued. "This is her special day. I don't want her stressed. Her special day. Not our special day. Not their special day. Hers." I looked at my son, really looked at him, at the man he'd become. 24 years old, college educated, working a good job in marketing, living in a nice apartment with his new wife. He looked successful, put together like someone who had their life figured out. But in that moment, standing in his expensive wedding venue in his tailored suit, asking his mother to leave because his bride didn't like her, he looked like a stranger. "Are you sure about this?" My voice came out steady, calm. "I don't know how. Are you absolutely sure?" "Yes." No hesitation. Not even a pause to think about it. Just go. "We'll talk later." Later. Always later with him these days. "We'll talk later about Thanksgiving. Later about Christmas. Later about why he hadn't called in 3 weeks. Later about why he forgot my birthday last month." I set my champagne glass on the dessert table. The glass made a soft clink against the white linen tablecloth. A server nearby glanced over, then quickly looked away when she saw my face. Could she tell? Could everyone tell that I was being kicked out of my own son's wedding? "Okay," I said. I didn't hug him, didn't kiss his cheek, didn't touch him at all. I just turned and walked through the reception hall with my head up and my shoulders back and my purse clutched tight under my arm. The music seemed louder suddenly, the laughter more shrill. Every face I passed felt like a judgment. Did they know? Could they see the mother of the groom walking out in the middle of the reception, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor like a countdown? The June sun was blinding when I pushed through the double doors. The parking lot stretched out in front of me, rows and rows of cars glinting in the afternoon light. Mine was at the far end, alone in a corner space because I'd arrived so early. A practical sedan, 14 years old with a dent in the back bumper from when I'd backed into a pole last winter. I walked across the hot asphalt. Heat radiated up through my shoes. Sweat gathered at the base of my spine. By the time I reached my car, my face was wet with it. Or maybe tears. I couldn't tell anymore. I sat in the driver's seat and started the engine. The air conditioning blasted hot air for the first minute, then gradually cooled. I could see the venue in my rearview mirror, a beautiful building with stone walls and ivy and massive windows. Inside, my son was celebrating, dancing, laughing, eating expensive food, and drinking expensive wine and toasting to his future with his new wife. And I was sitting alone in a parking lot, still holding the card with $8,000 in my purse. 4 hours home. I drove in complete silence. No radio, no podcasts, no audiobooks, just the hum of tires on asphalt and the whoosh of passing cars and the air conditioning blowing cold against my damp face. The sun moved across the sky and sank behind the mountains and disappeared entirely, leaving only darkness and highway lights. I stopped once for gas. The station was empty except for a teenage Clear who barely looked up from his phone. I paid used. The bathroom bought a bottle of water I didn't drink. Then I got back in my car and drove some more. The property looked different when I pulled into the driveway near midnight. Or maybe I was different. The porch light was on. I'd left it on before I left that morning a lifetime ago. The house sat quiet and dark, except for that one light. No one waiting, no one to tell about the wedding, no one to hold me while I cried. I sat in the car for a long time, just sitting staring at the house. The one I'd bought with Marcus 30 years ago when we were young and stupid, and so in love we couldn't see straight. The one where we'd brought Dominic home from the hospital, where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases and graduations where Marcus had died in bed next to me, his hand going cold in mine while I screamed for someone to help the garden needed weeding. I could see it even in the dark, the flower beds overgrown, the shrubs getting wild, the fence posts near the barn were starting to rot. The barn itself needed a new roof, 40 acres of land, and most days it felt like too much. Too much space, too much work, too much memory, but it was mine. My grandfather had bought this land in 1952. My father had maintained it for 40 years. Marcus and I had made it a home, and someday I'd always thought someday it would be Dominic's. I got out of the car. The night air was cool and smelled like pine and earth. Crickets sang in the grass. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out. I walked to the back porch and sat on the steps and didn't go inside. I didn't cry. Couldn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe too hurt. Maybe too numb to feel anything at all. I made myself a cup of tea when the sky started turning gray. Chamomile. Marcus used to drink chamomile tea when he couldn't sleep. I'd hated the taste back then, but now it reminded me of him, of sitting together in the kitchen at €3 in the morning when Dominic had colic and wouldn't stop screaming, of laughing through exhaustion and fear and the overwhelming responsibility of keeping a tiny human alive. The sun rose pink and gold over the mountains. Birds started singing. The world woke up and moved on like nothing had happened, like my son hadn't just shattered my heart into pieces small enough to fit through his fingers. The phone rang at 8:30. I was on my knees in the front garden pulling weeds dirt packed under my fingernails. Sweat gathered on my forehead despite the early hour. My back ached from sleeping on the porch, but the physical pain was almost welcome. Something tangible, something I could understand. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Dominic's name lit up the screen. For a second, I thought maybe he was calling to apologize, to say he'd made a mistake, to beg forgiveness for humiliating me in front of 100 people at his wedding, for throwing away 24 years of unconditional love because his new wife didn't like me. I answered, "Mom, hey." His voice was bright, cheerful, like yesterday hadn't happened, like we just talked last week about normal things. Quick question. Can you send me the property papers? I sat back on my heels. A bee hummed past my ear and landed on the lavender bush beside me. Purple flowers bobbed in the slight breeze. The morning sun was warm on my shoulders. The property papers, I repeated. My voice sounded strange, distant, like someone else was speaking. Yeah, for the Colorado land, he said it so casually, like he was asking to borrow a book. Bridget and I were talking, and we think it would be perfect for development. Her uncle's a contractor, really successful guy. He says we could subdivide it and build maybe 6 or 7 houses. The market's really hot right now. We could make a fortune development. subdivide 6 or 7 houses on my family's land, on my grandfather's land, on the 40 acres that had belonged to our family for 70 years. The bee moved to another flower. I watched it work, gathering pollen, flying off to the next bloom. Simple, purposeful, unburdened by betrayal. We'd split the profit with you, obviously, Dominic continued. His voice had that excited quality he got when he thought he'd come up with a brilliant plan. Probably 60-40 since we'd be doing all the work on our end. But you'd still make at least a couple hundred CUAUSN, maybe more if we price it right. And then you could move somewhere smaller, somewhere easier to manage, somewhere smaller, somewhere easier. Like the 40 acres my grandfather died protecting was too much for me. Like the home I'd shared with Marcus was just a burden I needed to escape. Bridget actually found this great senior community about 20 minutes from us. He said, "Really nice place. They have activities and a pool and everything. You'd love it." I'm 58. Dominic. Right? Yeah, I know. Actually laughed, but eventually you'll need something easier to manage, less upkeep. This way you'd have the money set aside. It's smart planning, Mom. Future planning. Smart planning. My son wanted to bulldo my family's history, turn my grandfather's legacy into profit, and stuff me in a senior community, and he called it smart planning. I stood up, my knees cracked, the bee flew away. Around me, the garden stretched out 30 years of work of planting and pruning and nurturing roses. My mother had given me as cutings, herbs I'd grown from seed, a vegetable patch that fed me through summer. "So, can you overnight the deed?" Dominic asked. "We want to get the process started this week. Bridget's uncle has a meeting with some investors on Thursday and he needs to see the property documents." Thursday, 3 days away. He wanted me to hand over 70 years of family history in 3 days, so his wife's uncle could impress some investors. "Dominic," I said slowly, "about yesterday." "Oh yeah." He interrupted me like he just remembered like it was a minor inconvenience he'd forgotten to address. "Sorry about that. Bridget was just stressed. Wedding day jitters or whatever, but it's fine now. Everything's fine. Everything's fine." He'd humiliated me. Forced me to drive 4 hours home alone made me feel small and worthless and disposable. But everything was fine now because he wanted something from me. "So the papers." His voice had an edge of impatience now. "Can you send them today? I can text you the address for overnight delivery." I thought about my grandfather, about the stories my father used to tell. How Grandpa worked in the mines 16 hours a day in the pitch dark. How he lost 3 fingers in an accident when my grandmother was 6 months old but went back to work the next week because they needed money. How he saved every penny he could for years until he had enough to buy this land. $3,000 in 1952. It might as well have been $3 million for a man who'd lost fingers to buy it. I thought about my father spending every weekend for 40 years, maintaining the property, building the barn with his own hands over 3 summers, planting the oak trees that now towered 60 feet high, creating something permanent, something that couldn't be taken away. I thought about Marcus making me promise on his deathbed to keep this land in the family. His hand cold in mine, his voice barely a whisper. "No matter what happens, Karen, no matter what, this land stays ours." And I thought about Bridget's smile as she watched Dominic kick me out. That sharp, calculating smile, that look of victory. "Mom, you still there? I'm here." "Okay, good. So can you send them today?" The bee came back. It landed on a cluster of black-eyed Susans near my feet. The petals were bright yellow, almost painful to look at in the morning sun. "The property papers," I said again, not a question this time. A statement. "Yeah, the sooner the better." Bridget's uncle is really excited about this opportunity. He thinks we could break ground by fall if we move fast. break ground. Bulldozers and construction crews and concrete mixers, destroying everything my family had built. My grandfather's oak trees cut down, my father's barn demolished, the meadow where Marcus proposed to me paved over. Mom, are you listening? Do you remember your grandfather's funeral? I asked. My voice was quiet, steady. Dad's funeral when you were 20. Silence on the other end. Then you gave the eulogy, I continued. You stood in front of 200 people and talked about how much this land meant to him, how it represented everything good about our family, about legacy and sacrifice and protecting what matters. More silence. You promised you'd take care of it, I said. You looked right at me and your grandmother and promised you'd protect what he built. Do you remember that, Mom? That was different. His voice had changed. Defensive now. Irritated. I was a kid. You were 20 years old. Old enough to know what a promise means. Yeah. Well, people say things at funerals. It's emotional. You can't hold me to. You also said your grandfather would be proud of you, I interrupted. That you'd make sure his legacy lived on. That this land would stay in our family for generations. And it will, Dominic shot back. It'll be mine eventually. I'm just trying to make it work for us now. Make it profitable. Turn it into something useful instead of just letting it sit there. Just letting it sit there. Like 40 acres of protected land was worthless. Like preserving family history was wasteful. Like everything my grandfather and father worked for was just an inconvenience waiting to be liquidated. So you're saying no? His voice went cold, hard. You won't send the papers. I could hear Bridget in the background, her voice sharp and demanding. Is she being difficult? That's what I was. Difficult for wanting to keep my family's legacy intact. Difficult for not immediately agreeing to let them destroy 70 years of history for profit. Dominic, I need to go. Wait, Mom. We really need those papers. This is a huge opportunity. Don't you want me to succeed? I'd wanted him to succeed since the day he was born. I'd wanted it so badly. I'd sacrificed everything. My career advancement, my social life, my health, my savings, everything I had and everything I went into, making sure Dominic had every opportunity to succeed. And this is what it got me. A son who kicked me out of his wedding and called the next day demanding I hand over my family's land. I'll call you back, I said. When impatience sharpened his voice. Mom, this is time sensitive. We can't just wait around while I hung up. The phone buzzed immediately with another call. I declined it. It rang again and again and again. By the time I'd pulled all the weeds from the front flower bed, Dominic had called 6 more times. I ignored everyone. I went inside and washed my hands, made myself lunch, tuna fish sandwich and cucumber slices and a glass of cold water. I sat on the back porch and ate slowly, watching the oak trees sway in the breeze. My phone buzzed. A text message. I looked at it. Mom, this is ridiculous. Call me back. Then another asterisk. You're being selfish. Asterisk, then asterisk. Bridget's uncle needs an answer by tomorrow. Asterisk, then asterisk. I can't believe you're doing this to me. Asterisk to him. I was doing something to him, not the other way around. Not him doing something to me by kicking me out of his wedding or demanding my property or calling me selfish and difficult and controlling. I was the problem. Me, the mother who'd given up everything. I finished my lunch and washed the dishes. The afternoon sun poured through the kitchen windows. Dust motes floated in the light. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the living room, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of old wood settling. My phone rang. A voicemail notification popped up. I put it on speaker and listened while I dried the dishes. Mom, it's me. Dominic's voice was tight, really angry. I don't know what's going on with you, but this is my inheritance too. Dad would have wanted me to have this. You're being controlling again, just like Bridget said, just like you always are. Just send the papers. Stop making everything difficult. I deleted the voicemail. The phone rang again immediately. Bridget's name this time. I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. Then I listened to that message too. Hi, Mom. She'd never called me Mom before. Always Karen. The fake sweetness in her voice made my teeth hurt. This is Bridget. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Dominic and I love you so much, and we just want what's best for everyone. The development would be amazing for your financial future. You could finally relax and enjoy your retirement. Can we talk about this? Like adults, I really think we just need to have a calm, rational conversation. Like adults. The same woman who'd had me thrown out of her wedding yesterday wanted to talk like adults. The same woman who was pushing my son to steal my family's land wanted a calm, rational conversation. I deleted that voicemail too. The evening came on slow and golden. I made tea and sat in Marcus's old armchair. The leather was cracked, now worn smooth in places where his body had pressed against it for years, but it still smelled like him. Somehow like coffee and cedarwood and home. What would you do? I asked the empty room. If you were here, if you could see what he's become, what would you do? The clock on the mantel ticked. Outside, a coyote howled somewhere in the distance. The sound was lonely and wild and free. The phone rang at 9 Oriro. Dominic again. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I answered finally. He sounded exhausted, defeated. Mom, please, we need to discuss this. Okay, I said. Let's discuss it. Look, I get that you're attached to the property. I understand, but you have to be realistic. You're not getting any younger. The maintenance is too much for one person, and the property is just sitting there not generating any income. We could turn it into something valuable, something that actually makes money and secures all our futures. Your great-grandfather paid $3,000 for this land in 1952. I said, do you know what he did to earn that money? Mom, I don't need a history lesson. He worked in the mines 16-hour days in the dark. He lost 3 fingers in an accident when your grandmother was 6 months old. But he kept working because he wanted to give his family something permanent, something that couldn't be taken away. Silence on the other end. Your grandfather spent every weekend for 40 years maintaining this property. I continued. He planted those oak trees for you, Dominic, for his grandchildren, for his great-grandchildren. He built that barn with his own hands so future generations would have something solid, something real. That's a nice story, Dominic said. His voice was flat, unimpressed. But this is business. This is about making smart financial decisions for our future, mine and Bridget's. We can honor the past while still moving forward. Our future, not my future, not the family's future. His and Bridget's. Do you know what your father said before he died? The words came out before I could stop them. Dominic went quiet. I could hear him breathing, hear something shuffle in the background. Maybe Bridget moving around listening to our conversation. He made me promise to keep this land in the family, I said. It was one of the last things he said. He grabbed my hand so tight it hurt and made me swear. No matter what happens, Karen, this land stays ours. Dad's been gone for 12 years, Mom. Dominic's voice had gone cold again, distant. Things change. The world moves on. You can't live in the past forever. Things change. My husband's deathbed promise reduced to things change. The sacrifice of generations dismissed with the world moves on. You're right, I said. My voice was very calm, very quiet. Things do change, so you'll send the papers. Hope crept into his voice. Eagerness. We can do this together, Mom. As a family, we'll all benefit. I looked around the living room. Pictures covered every wall. Dominic at 5 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a fish he'd caught in the creek. Dominic at 12 with his first piano trophy. Dominic at 18 in his graduation gown standing between me and Marcus. Dominic at 22 with his college diploma. The one I'd worked 60-hour weeks to help pay for every picture a memory, every memory a sacrifice, every sacrifice worthless now. Mom, are you still there yesterday at your wedding? I said slowly, carefully. When you told me to leave. God, are we really going back to that? Frustration exploded in his voice. I said I was sorry. What more do you want? You said Bridget was stressed. That's not an apology, he sighed. Heavy and theatrical. Fine, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry you got your feelings hurt. Can we please move on now? Your feelings hurt. Like I was a child who'd been denied dessert. Like 24 years of motherhood could be reduced to hurt feelings. Dominic. I closed my eyes. Do you love me? What kind of question is that? It's a simple question. Of course I love you. You're my mom. Then why did you humiliate me in front of 100 people? I didn't humiliate you. Bridget was upset and I handled it. That's what husbands do. They protect their wives from their mothers when their mothers are being. He stopped, caught himself, but I heard it anyway. The word he didn't say. Difficult controlling. Whatever Bridget had told him I was, I paid for your wedding flowers, I said. $8,000. That's all I did. Because you asked me to. You also kept giving opinions about everything else. The venue, the food, the music. Bridget felt like you were trying to take over. I said the venue was beautiful. Once when you showed me pictures and asked what I thought you said, it seemed expensive. I had said that because it was expensive because the wedding cost more than most people's annual salary. Because they'd asked me to contribute and I'd given them everything I had. Dominic, I drove 4 hours to watch you get married. I wore a dress I could barely afford because Bridget wanted formal attire. I gave you $8,000 I'd saved for emergencies, and you threw me out like I was nothing. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? No answer, just breathing, just silence stretching between us like a chasm. And now I continued. 24 hours later, you're calling me asking for more. Asking me to hand over my family's land so you can destroy it and make a profit. Asking me to give up everything my grandfather and father worked for so you and your wife can get rich. We're not destroying it. We're developing it. Is there, Mom, be realistic? You can't maintain that property forever. You're getting older. Your health won't hold up. Eventually you'll need help and I won't be able to. I'm 58, Dominic, not 80. But eventually you will be 80. And then what you'll be stuck on 40 acres you can't manage. Too stubborn to ask for help. Probably breaking a hip trying to fix a fence post. So you're planning my decline. How thoughtful. I'm being practical. Someone has to be by bulldozing my home and putting me in a senior community. By helping you transition to something more manageable before it becomes a crisis. A crisis. My life was a crisis waiting to happen. My home was a burden. My family's legacy was an inconvenience. The answer is no, I said. The words came out steady, final. What no? I'm not sending you the property papers. Not now. Not ever. You can't do that. It's my inheritance. It's my property. Your father left it to me, but I'm your son. I'm your only child. Who else would you leave it to? I don't know yet. but it won't be someone who kicks me out of their wedding and then calls the next day demanding I hand over my family's land." His voice went cold, ice cold. "You're really going to do this over one mistake, 24 years of love and sacrifice, dismissed as one mistake, a lifetime of putting him first reduced to being petty and vindictive because my feelings got hurt. Goodbye, Dominic." "Mom, wait. If you hang up, I hung up." The phone immediately started ringing again. I turned it off and set it face down on the table. The silence was shocking, complete. I sat in Marcus's chair and listened to the house settle around me. The old wood creaking, the wind rattling the windows, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I didn't cry, still couldn't. The tears were locked somewhere deep inside behind a wall of numbness that wouldn't break. I slept in the chair that night. When I woke, pale dawn, light was creeping through the windows, and my neck was stiff, and my back ached, and my phone was still turned off on the table. 3 days passed like that. I worked in the garden. I cleaned the house. I walked the property from corner to corner, touching trees my grandfather had planted, running my hands along the barn walls my father had built. I visited Marcus's grave under the willow tree and told him everything. "I don't know what to do," I said to the headstone. The carved letters of his name were rough under my fingers. "I don't know how to fix this, but maybe it couldn't be fixed. Maybe some things once broken stayed broken forever." On the 4th day, I turned my phone back on. 47 missed calls, 32 text messages, 15 voicemails. I didn't read them all, didn't listen to them all, but I saw enough. Dominic's messages started angry, then turned desperate, then circled back to angry again. Threats mixed with pleas mixed with guilt trips. "You're going to regret this. Asterisk, asterisk, I'll contest. Dad's will. Asterisk, you can't keep me from what's mine. Asterisk, please, Mom, I'm begging you. Isk, asterisk. Bridget's uncle is really upset. Asterisk, asterisk, you're ruining everything. Asterisk, asterisk, I hate you. Asterisk, asterisk. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. Asterisk, please just call me back. Risk." Bridget's messages were more calculated, more manipulative, talking about family and love and forgiveness, while making it clear that none of those things mattered unless I gave them what they wanted. One voicemail from Dominic made me stop, made me sit down on the porch steps and listen all the way through. "Mom," his voice was broken, shaking. "I know you're mad. I know I messed up, but please, I'm your son. I'm all you have left. Don't throw that away over a piece of land. It's just land. We're family. That's supposed to mean something. Just land. The 40 acres my grandfather nearly died to buy. The property my father devoted his life to maintaining. The home I'd shared with Marcus. The place where every important memory of my life had happened. Just land. I deleted the voicemail. Then I got in my car and drove to town. The lawyer's office was on Main Street above the hardware store. I'd used her before when Marcus died when I refinanced the house. Her name was Patricia Nolan, and she was smart and thorough and didn't waste time on small talk. Curran, she stood when I walked into her office. "I wasn't expecting you. Is everything all right?" "No," I said, "but it will be." I told her everything. The wedding, the phone call, the property, Dominic's demands, and Bridget's manipulation, and the 70 years of family history they wanted to destroy for profit. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What do you want to do? I want to protect this land." I said, "Forever. I want to make sure it can never be developed or subdivided or destroyed. I want to honor the sacrifice my grandfather and father made. I want to keep the promise I made to my husband. There's a way to do that, Patricia said. She pulled out a legal pad and started writing. A conservation trust. You donate the land to a trust with specific protections. The land stays wild, protected forever. It can never be sold or developed. And Dominic, he'd have no claim to it. The land would belong to the trust, not to you, not to your estate. It would be removed from your will, entirely protected, forever never developed, never destroyed. My grandfather's trees would keep growing. My father's barn would keep standing. The meadow where Marcus proposed would stay wild and beautiful, and Dominic would get nothing. How soon can we do this? I asked. I can have the papers drawn up by tomorrow. You'll need to sign in front of a notary. Then we file with the state. It's permanent, Karen. Once you sign, you can't undo it. Good, I said. That's what I want. Permanent. I left her office and drove home through afternoon sunshine. The mountains were sharp against the blue sky. The trees were green and full. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 4 days ago, but I was different. That evening, I sat on the back porch with tea and watched the sun set. My phone rang twice, Dominic both times. I didn't answer. I had nothing to say to him, not until the papers were signed. Patricia called the next morning. Papers are ready. Can you come in today? I was there within the hour. The documents were thick dozens of pages of legal language and conditions and protections. Patricia walked me through every section, every clause, every permanence. Once you sign, she said again, this can't be undone. The land will belong to the trust. You'll have no ability to sell it or develop it or pass it to heirs. I understand. You won't be able to change your mind. I know. She handed me a pen. It was heavy, expensive, the kind of pen that meant something. I signed my name. Karen Elizabeth Patterson. On the first page, then the second, then 5 more pages. Each signature a nail in a coffin. Each signature a protection. Each signature a promise kept. It's done, Patricia said. She witnessed my signatures, then sealed the documents in an envelope. I'll file these with the state this afternoon. The trust will be official by the end of the week. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out. Do you need to get that? Patricia asked. Yes, I said. I think I do. I answered. Put it on speaker so Patricia could hear. Mom! Dominic's voice was ragged, desperate. Please, we can work this out. I'll do anything. Just don't shut me out. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Please. I looked at Patricia at the envelope of signed documents on her desk, at the pen still in my hand. Dominic, I said. My voice was steady. Calm, listen carefully. I'm going to say this once. Okay. Yes, I'm listening. It's not yours anymore. Silence. Complete and total silence. I could hear him breathing. Could almost hear his brain trying to process what I'd said. What? His voice was small, confused. What do you mean it's not the land? I said, it's not yours anymore. It never will be. I've donated it to a conservation trust. The papers were signed an hour ago. The land is protected forever. It can never be developed or sold or subdivided. More silence. Then you can't do that. I already did. But that's my inheritance. You can't just give away my inheritance. It was never your inheritance, Dominic. It was my property given to me by your father. And I've chosen to protect it the way he wanted, the way my grandfather and father would have wanted. No. His voice was rising, panicking. No, you can't. I'll contest it. I'll take you to court. You'll do nothing. I said, because there's nothing you can do. The trust is irrevocable, final. There's no contesting it, No undoing it. The land will stay wild forever, and you'll never touch it. I could hear Bridget in the background, her voice sharp and angry. What? What did she do? You kicked me out of your wedding, I continued. You humiliated me in front of 100 people because your wife didn't like me. Then you called the next day demanding I hand over my family's legacy so you could destroy it for profit. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences, Mom, please? My grandfather lost 3 fingers working in the mines to buy this land. My father spent 40 years maintaining it. Your father made me promise to protect it, and I kept that promise. Even from you, you're choosing dirt over your own son. His voice cracked. Broke. That's what you're doing. I'm choosing to honor the people who came before us, the people who sacrificed everything. You had a choice too, Dominic. At your wedding, you chose Bridget over me. Now I've made my choice. I can't believe you do this. He was crying now. Actually crying. I'm your son. I'm all you have. No, I said quietly. You were all I had. You gave that up when you threw me out like garbage. When you called me controlling and difficult and demanded my property 24 hours later, you made your choice. Now live with it. Mom. I hung up, turned off my phone, set it on Patricia's desk. Are you okay? She asked. Yes, I said. And I meant it. I'm okay. 6 months passed. Autumn came and went. Winter arrived with snow that covered the property in white silence. The phone calls from Dominic eventually stopped. The text messages dwindled to nothing. The desperate voicemails ceased. But the emails started forwarded from his lawyer, threatening legal action, claiming undue influence, demanding, I reverse the trust donation. Patricia handled all of it. Every email, every threat, every desperate attempt to undo what couldn't be undone. His lawyer says Bridget left him. Patricia told me in February. We were having coffee in her office discussing the final trust paperwork. Apparently, she filed for divorce 2 months ago. I'm not surprised. I said she wanted money. When the money didn't materialize, why would she stay? His lawyer says he wants to reconcile with you, that he's realized he made mistakes. What did you tell him? That all communication goes through me, that you're not interested in contact right now, that if he wants a relationship with you, he needs to respect your boundaries and give you space. I sipped my coffee. Through the window, Main Street was quiet. A few cars drove past. A couple walked by holding hands. Normal life continuing. There's something else, Patricia said. Something I need to tell you. I looked at her. She pulled out another file, opened it, and slid a document across the desk. Your will, she said. The one you updated 10 years ago after Marcus died. What about it? Do you remember what you did? I frowned. I left everything to Dominic. He was my only child, my only heir. Not quite. Patricia tapped the document. You left your personal possessions to Dominic. Your savings, your car, but the property, the land. You left that to a conservation trust. You set it up years ago. You just never activated it. I stared at the paper at my signature at the bottom. At the date, March 2017, 2 years after Marcus died. I don't remember this, I said slowly. Marcus's lawyer suggested it, Patricia explained, as a protection in case something happened to you before Dominic was mature enough to appreciate the land's value. It was a contingency, a safety net. I read through the document, every word, every clause. Patricia was right. I'd set up a conservation trust years ago as a backup plan. If I died, the land would go to the trust automatically. Dominic would get everything else but not the property. Why didn't you tell me this before I asked? Because you didn't need it before. You were handling the donation personally. But this shows something important, Karen. This shows you've been protecting this land for years. that your recent decision wasn't made in anger or revenge. It was the culmination of years of careful planning. I sat back in my chair, looked out the window at the gray February sky. I'd forgotten about this. Marcus's lawyer suggested it right after the funeral. I was so numb. I just signed whatever he put in front of me. But you signed it, Patricia said gently. Some part of you knew even then. Even when Dominic was younger and hadn't married Bridget yet. Some part of you knew the land needed protection. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd always known that Dominic might one day choose money over legacy, choose convenience over sacrifice, choose himself over the family that came before him. Or maybe I'd just been a grieving widow trying to honor her husband's wishes, trying to keep a promise to a dying man. Either way, the result was the same. The land was protected forever. Spring came early that year. By March, wildflowers were blooming across the meadow, purple lupine and yellow balsam root and white yarrow creating a carpet of color. I walked through them every morning, feeling the sun on my face, listening to birds sing, breathing air that smelled like pine and earth and growing things. I started bringing groups of kids to the property. Inner city kids from Denver who'd never seen mountains or forests or open sky. I taught them about plants and animals and conservation, about protecting wild places, about legacy and sacrifice, and the responsibility we have to future generations. The kids loved it. They ran through the meadow and climbed the oak trees and played in the barn. They asked a million questions and got dirty and laughed until they couldn't breathe. They reminded me why this land mattered, why protecting it was worth losing my son. Because these kids, these strangers, appreciated the land more in one afternoon than Dominic had in 24 years. In April, I got a letter. Not an email, an actual letter in the mailbox. Dominic's handwriting on the envelope. I sat on the porch steps and opened it. 3 pages front and back. His handwriting messy and rushed, like he'd written it in one sitting without stopping. It was an apology, a real one. He talked about the wedding, about kicking me out, about how Bridget had convinced him I was trying to control them, about how he'd been so focused on starting his new life that he'd forgotten about the one that made it possible. He talked about the property, about how wrong he'd been to demand it, how he hadn't understood the history, hadn't respected the sacrifice, hadn't valued what it meant to me and to our family. He talked about Bridget leaving, about realizing she'd never loved him. She'd loved the idea of money, of what his inheritance could buy. When that disappeared, so did she. He talked about being alone, about understanding now what I must have felt about regret and shame and the desperate wish to undo what couldn't be undone. The last paragraph made me cry for the first time since the wedding, made the tears finally break through the wall. Asterisk. Mom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be fixed, but I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what you did and why you did it. You kept your promise to Dad. You protected our family's legacy. You honored Grandpa and Grandpa's sacrifices. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to see it. I love you. I'll always love you. Even if you never want to speak to me again, I love you. Your son, Dominic Asterisk. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope, sat there on the porch steps and cried until I couldn't anymore. Cried for my son, for the relationship we'd had, for the innocence lost, for the trust broken. But I didn't call him. Didn't write back. Not yet. Maybe someday. When enough time had passed, when enough healing had happened, when I could look at him without seeing Bridget's knife smile or hearing him say, "You need to leave." Maybe someday, but not today. The property bloomed that spring, everything green and alive and growing. The oak trees my grandfather planted reached higher toward the sky. The barn my father built stood strong against the wind. The meadow where Marcus proposed filled with flowers, and I walked through it all alone, but not lonely, knowing I'd kept my promise, knowing I'd protected what mattered, knowing that long after I was gone, this land would remain wild and free and untouched. My grandfather planted trees he'd never sit under. My father built a barn for grandchildren he'd never meet. My husband made me promise to protect this land even from our own son, and I kept that promise. Because legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you refuse to let be destroyed. Some of you watching this know exactly how this feels. When the people you die for treat you like you're disposable, when your sacrifices are forgotten the moment they become inconvenient, when love becomes one-sided and expectations become demands, and you realize you've been giving pieces of yourself to someone who sees you as a resource, not a person. But here's what I learned standing in that lawyer's office with a pen in my hand. Real love isn't measured by what we give. It's measured by whether our giving is valued or exploited. And sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves, and even for them, is let people face the consequences of their choices. My son learned that lesson the hard way. Maybe you're teaching someone that lesson right now. Maybe you're learning it yourself. To anyone who's been counted out, pushed aside, or told they're too old, too difficult, or too much, you're not finished. Your story isn't over. Your worth isn't determined by people who can't see it, and your legacy is yours to protect. What lesson hit you hardest from this story? And if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have protected the land, or would you have chosen differently? I want to hear your thoughts. Don't stop here. Click the next video on your screen right now and watch another powerful story from our channel. There's more you need to hear. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. And share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me what this story taught you. I read every comment. See you in the next